Hi, I'm Mayor Matt Larson. I'd like to tell you about an exciting new project coming to downtown historical Snoqualmie. Many of you may recall several years ago, Sigillo Cellars came into the old Mignon building downtown, located between the Copperstone and the down-to-earth flower shop that you can see in the photo here. It's the building in the center. And that was with Mike and Ryan Seal, who you see in the back in this photo with their family. Great folks. They were very excited about coming here, and they were warmly and enthusiastically welcomed by this community and many here that appreciate having this business here. The dilemma was that they have done so well and succeeded so well that they've outgrown this location. And Mike and Ryan were both at a dilemma because they love being in Snoqualmie, but they felt that their business had to relocate elsewhere. So we entered into discussions with them. As many know, we've had, as you see, the King Street lot, which is located kitty corner from the Northwest Railway Museum Depot downtown next to the pizza shop, has been for sale. It's a city-owned property for some time. It's also located near the Sandy Cove Park, which will remain a park accessible to the public. It's only the King Street lot that's been up for sale. We entered into a purchase and sale agreement with Mike and Ryan to secure the lot while they did their due diligence to put together a performer or business plan. And they've now determined that they want to move forward and execute the construction of a new building so they can stay and keep their business in Snoqualmie. This is a conceptual drawing that's now come out about what their building would look like. The idea is to create a building that looks like it's been here for about 100 years, that looks like an old cannery. The problem and challenge right now with our current codes and whatnot is that this building, as you can see, they wanted to elevate it to get out of the floodway because of the high insurance costs, and also to get the kind of interior spaces they need for their business plan. It exceeds our current height limits. And so what I want to do before I talk more about the project, just give you a bit of more background about the downtown in general and the revitalization efforts that we've been doing, and why we think we need to be a little more flexible in terms of how we address these kind of opportunities in the future. So it's just as a quick background, some of the huge challenges for Main Street Americas across America one was the construction of the interstate freeway systems from the Eisenhower administration in the late 50s. In the early 70s is when the I-90 was completed through the valley here. And like Main Streets across America, it was a huge challenge when Main Streets had to compete with shopping malls that people could quickly drive to. It was a huge challenge for them. The 1970s was a tough time for the downtown Snoqualmie because at the same time, one of our biggest economic drivers in the valley was the timber industry, and in the 1970s is when that activity at the mill site started to quickly wane, and by the mid-90s it was pretty much non-existent. Flooding was also a huge concern that caused challenges for downtown in the old historic district. One was that there were levees constructed throughout in the 1960s in North Bend, and what that did was it took floodways and plains that acted as a reservoir for water in North Bend and basically put it in a fire hose and shot it down the river towards Snoqualmie. This was also exacerbated by wetlands, new wetlands, federal wetlands and laws and dredging of creeks and streams that could no longer be done. That was happened by the federal government in the 60s and 70s. And for example, we have a farm on the south end of town here that used to be rolling green pastures, and it's now a big bog because they could no longer keep those areas clear. And so whereas the pastures acted as a reservoir for floodwaters, the bog does not. And again, it exacerbated flooding. And then FEMA insurance costs for folks in the floodway started going sky high, especially if you're not raised out of the floodway when you build a structure. And we currently have a height limit of 30 feet downtown. And as we kind of question ourselves, why are private investors not following the public investments in the downtown area? It became clear as we looked at other peer communities or destinations for main streets like North Bend, Leavenworth, Poulsbo, Issaquah, Port Townsend, Yakima, and Chelan. All of these communities that are succeeding in some of the revitalization efforts have height limits in excess of 35 to 65 feet, and we're at 30 feet. And then another thing a consultant years ago, Roger Brooks from Destination Development, pointed out was that we have half of a downtown, so we lack the economies of scale to really build off of there because the other half is the Northwest Railway Museum, which 15 years ago was looking in pretty tired and worn shape itself. So what are the strategies that we've been taking to really try to turn that around and take these and address all these challenges and mitigate that? One is to, in terms of flooding, we've had some great projects going, like the widening of the river that took place a little over a decade ago, what was called the Core 205 project. It kind of took a pinch point out by the floodwaters at the Snoqualmie Falls that reduced the flooding in Snoqualmie in a 100-year flood event by about a foot. It was followed by the PSC reconstruction of the power plant there that lowered the Weir Dam and also took an additional foot of water out of the floodplain during a flood event. We've also done an aggressive home elevation program, so 26% of the housing downtown that's repetitive housing is now out of harm's way. But we need to address that with the retail center as well. We can't expect that retail developers are going to build their retail shops on the ground without elevating those, and with a 30-foot height restriction, it makes it very challenging, so we need more flexibility. We've invested also in what I would call the triple R's, the 3 R's, roads, railroads, and river. To date, we've completed 2 phases of 4 phases downtown with about a $10 million investment in reconstructing Falls Avenue, and you see the beautiful new boardwalk out in front of the museum. The Railroad Museum, we've worked hand in hand with them with their Northwest Railway History Museum, or campus, where they have the new restoration center and the exhibit hall, getting old dilapidated trains off the tracks in a place where they can restore those trains and really move toward making that a world-class destination, so the downtown museum becomes a tremendous asset and draw-in destination for downtown revitalization efforts. And then lastly, the river is the next big phase we're focusing on, which is investments in extensive river walk trails and a boardwalk behind the retail area that we think would be a tremendous attraction to tourists, or particularly the 2 million visitors that come to the falls. But we want to capture those folks to come down here and leave dollars in town to help keep our service levels high. And then lastly, as I intimated before, we need more flexibility in height and building standards to address issues like parking, flood insurance costs to again accommodate businesses, and also take into account designs and what we call appurtenances, or things like an elevator shack on top of a roof. That shouldn't be part of a height limit, and other modifications to again be sensitive to what the development community needs in order to make it economically viable to invest in our downtown. Here's a quick shot of some of the Riverwalk plan. It's maybe hard to see this on the map, but you can find this on our website, and it shows a bit of the Riverwalk trails. The first phase that we're working on right now is really making a connection, a strong connection with Riverwalk, a trail along the river out to the Snoqualmie Falls and connecting the downtown with a boardwalk behind that area. So coming back to the Sigillo's project again, here is the conceptual plan on the King Street lot. This is the front elevation facing Railroad Avenue, and again, it's a beautiful brick and steel sort of motif, historical motif and design. You see what we would call an appurtenance with the cloistery windows or the skylights on the top of the roof that we would not want to be counted against the height limit, in addition to the elevation that you see, or the platform, like a loading platform where it's lifted off the ground to accommodate for flooding to reduce significantly the insurance costs for a developer. Here's a side view, and looking from like the bowling alley toward the Sigillo's shop. You can see in the back here in the area that I just surrounded with the red line, there's a structure that the Seals proposed to build in the park. And this is perhaps what's created some confusion in the minds of some folks in the public. There was an assertion that we sold the lot undervalued at $200,000. We actually sold it for $450,000 at market value. And what's caused some confusion is that we have an option that the city controls, where in lieu of a payment of full or partial or full value, we can work with the Seals to have them build this structure in our public park, and then have them convey it to the community to be an asset for the public. And again, here's the rear of the building, or the back side of the building. And then here's a floor plan. And again, these may be hard to see on this slide, so I encourage you to go to our website under Smart Growth tab and look for the Sigillo's project. You can see all this in more detail. Again, you can see the platform in the back here. It would accommodate, like putting a dining table out there, or it could accommodate a wedding party with views over the river. And we want this to integrate into a future boardwalk, and again, be some tremendous public amenities. But they would be owned by the public and controlled by the city on city property. And again, paid for in part, or in lieu of payment for the property for that. In the floor plan here, you can see the concept here is they want to put their whole winery processing. It would be a restaurant, a place to store wine barrels and do wine processing and wine tasting. And then upstairs would be a number of about 12 suites and bridal suites for bridal parties, a lot of weddings that would take place here. I think this is a great sort of use for downtown, and really fits with our plan. So with that, I thank you for taking the time to watch the video, and again, go online to find more information.